Turning 65 has made me look at my life with a kind of clarity I wasn't expecting. I've always known that getting older changes you, but I didn't realize just how much until recently. Over the last few years, something in me has shifted. I've found myself pulling away from people more than ever before. Not in a dramatic or emotional way, but quietly, almost instinctively. It's like my patience for crowds and noise has thinned, and the peace I used to ignore suddenly feels priceless. I sometimes wonder whether this distance I'm creating is normal or if it's just me drifting into my own world, but the more I pay attention, the more I see it happening naturally, almost without effort. A year ago, I talked about how I was beginning to withdraw from others after turning 60, and at the time, I thought I understood why. But another year has passed, and the feeling has deepened. I'm not just avoiding large gatherings or busy restaurants anymore. I'm making calculated decisions in my daily routine, where I shop, how I spend my evenings, even what streets I walk down, based on how likely I am to encounter noise, chaos, or people who drain my energy. This wasn't a sudden change. It crept up slowly, becoming more noticeable as the city I live in grew louder and busier. Back in 2021, my wife and I made a huge change. We left behind the old countryside house where we raised our family. It was the kind of place that held decades of memories, but it had become too big for just the two of us. We thought moving into the city would be refreshing, maybe even exciting. And at first, it was. Our new home, a Georgian townhouse in the heart of York, felt charming and convenient. Half the size, easier to maintain, close to everything we needed. We could walk to the shops, to the doctor, to small cafes we'd never tried before. The novelty gave us a little boost of energy, the kind you get when you turn a page and start a new chapter. But as time passed, the convenience that once felt like a luxury began to feel like a trap. The streets grew busier, the noise more constant. The romantic idea of city living didn't quite match the reality we found ourselves in. My tolerance for busy spaces had already been dropping with age, but being surrounded by people day and night magnified it. The city used to be a place I walked through with a sense of curiosity. Now it's a place I navigate with caution, looking for pockets of quiet like someone searching for oxygen. What made the difference more noticeable was how much the city seemed to change in just a couple of years. York has always been a tourist destination, but lately the crowds feel denser, more chaotic. The narrow streets, which once had a charming bustle, now feel like a fighting pit during peak hours. When I walk outside, I'm instantly aware of how many people are around me, how close they are, how quickly they move, how little space there is for anyone to breathe. It's not paranoia. It's a genuine sense of overwhelm that I never used to experience. A big part of this shift came from the behavior I started seeing daily. I grew up in a time when certain courtesies were just part of how you moved through the world. You held the door for someone. You let older people go ahead in line. You apologized if you bumped into someone. These weren't rules, they were habits. Little moments of respect that held society together in a gentle way. But in the city now, especially with so many younger people rushing around, those small gestures seem to be disappearing. The pace is faster, the attention span shorter. Everyone's looking at their phones, weaving through crowds without seeing the people around them. Going to the supermarket used to be a simple errand. Now it feels like I'm entering a maze where everyone is in their own world, moving unpredictably from aisle to aisle. I've lost count of how many times I've been bumped, cut off, or ignored entirely. There's a kind of self-centeredness I notice more now. Maybe it's always been there and I just used to tolerate it better. Or maybe my threshold for this kind of energy has dropped with age. Either way, I find myself leaving the store feeling more drained than when I arrived. That's when I started placing online grocery orders more often, not because I'm unable to shop, but because I don't want the unnecessary stress. Then there's another side of city life that hits a different nerve. York has become a popular stop for weekend parties, especially for groups of young people traveling from other cities. On Friday and Saturday nights, the streets transform. The noise level explodes. Crowds gather near the bars, shouting, laughing, stumbling. It's a completely different world after dark, and unfortunately, we live close enough to hear all of it. There have been nights when we're woken up by people yelling at 2 or 3 in the morning. Sometimes it's harmless noise, but other times it's accompanied by arguments, smashed bottles, or groups wandering around intoxicated. You can't quite relax when that kind of unpredictability hovers outside your door. It isn't only the nighttime chaos that's become uncomfortable. During the day, we also deal with groups of local drifters who gather near the convenience store. They're loud, unpredictable, and they leave the area in a state I wouldn't have imagined when we first moved here. It's difficult to feel at ease when you can't walk down your own street without wondering what kind of behavior you'll encounter. We've had moments where someone shouted at us for no reason, moments where we saw vandalism happening right in front of us, and even moments when the police had to step in because a group got completely out of control. It's unsettling, not just for my wife but for me as well. Over the last year especially, these experiences have accumulated, pushing us to reconsider how we spend our time. Instead of walking through the city center or sitting outside for a meal, I find myself getting into the car and heading out into the countryside. There's something about open fields, quiet roads, and the sound of the wind that feels like medicine now. I can breathe differently out there. My shoulders drop. My thoughts clear. It's the closest thing to how life felt in our old home, when everything moved at a slower and more comfortable pace. The more time I spend away from the city, the more I realize how much I've changed. My younger self wouldn't have minded the noise, the crowds, or the constant movement. I used to like exploring new places, trying new restaurants, walking through busy markets. I didn't think twice about being around strangers. But now, I'm more selective. I don't want quantity in my social life anymore. I want quality. I want peace. I want moments that feel nourishing instead of draining. This isn't something I planned. It's something I've grown into without even noticing. More and more, I find myself staying home in the evenings, and surprisingly, I've found joy in simple routines. Cooking meals from scratch, trying new recipes, baking something for my wife, inviting a small group of family or friends over, these are the things that bring me comfort now. I've come to appreciate small, intimate moments in a way I didn't when I was younger. A quiet dinner at home feels more meaningful to me than a noisy restaurant ever could. It's not antisocial. It's choosing connection over distraction. At the same time, I've noticed how my tolerance for certain environments has changed. Waiting at restaurants, sitting near loud tables, dealing with rushed service or crowded dining rooms, it all feels more tiring than enjoyable. When I think about going out for a meal, the first thing I consider now isn't the food or the location but the atmosphere. Will it be loud? Will it be packed? Will I spend half the evening waiting? If the answer is yes, I'd rather skip it entirely. My time and my peace matter too much to trade for that kind of stress. As I've paid more attention to these changes in myself, I've realized that avoiding people isn't just about noise or crowds. It's about energy. It's about emotional bandwidth. When you're younger, you have the capacity to deal with a lot of things at once. You can tolerate unpredictability, absorb stress, shake things off quickly, and bounce back the next day without feeling drained. But as the years pile up, so does the awareness of what truly matters to you, and what doesn't deserve space in your life anymore. I've started to see that my withdrawal isn't a sign of anything wrong. If anything, it feels like a sign of knowing myself better. At 65, I've lived enough life to understand what feeds me and what empties me. And the truth is, being surrounded by large groups of strangers, rushing crowds, or inconsiderate behavior leaves me feeling unsettled in a way it never did before. Maybe I was simply more adaptable in my younger years. Or maybe I was too busy to notice the effect other people had on my peace. Now I'm more aware of every detail, every raised voice, every chaotic moment, every environment that feels overwhelming. And there's something else. When you get older, you start valuing the time you have left. Not in a dramatic or fearful way, but in a practical, almost gentle way. You learn that time is a resource, and where you invest it matters. I no longer want to waste hours of my day on things that leave me irritated or tense. I'd rather spend that time doing something meaningful, or even doing nothing at all, as long as it feels peaceful. The idea of forcing myself into social situations I no longer enjoy feels unnecessary now. Sometimes I wonder whether this shift is rooted in personality. Maybe I've always leaned toward introversion but never had the chance to fully embrace it while raising a family, building a career, and keeping up with responsibilities. Life pushes you to interact with people constantly when you're younger. You're surrounded by colleagues, neighbors, school events, social gatherings. Even if you enjoy solitude, you rarely get the chance to truly experience it. But retirement, or even semi-retirement, changes the equation. It opens the door to choices you never had before. When things quiet down in your life, your true preferences start to surface. You begin to notice what feels natural and what feels forced. And for me, solitude feels more natural than it ever did. Not loneliness, just quiet. A kind of breathing room I didn't even know I needed. There's a comfort in waking up in the morning and knowing that the day is mine. I don't have to plan around anyone else's expectations. I can decide how social I want to be, or if I want to be social at all. Of course, that doesn't mean I've shut people out completely. I still enjoy meaningful conversations, close friendships, and family gatherings. In fact, I appreciate them more now than I ever have. But I want them in small doses. I want the kind of interactions that feel genuine, not rushed or overcrowded. When people visit us for dinner or a quiet evening, I find myself really listening, really enjoying their presence. There's no pressure to perform, no noise to talk over, no chaos to navigate. It's just connection in its simplest form. The contrast between those peaceful moments and the intensity of the city makes my preferences clearer. It's not that I dislike people. It's that I dislike environments that put people at their worst. Environments where stress, noise, and impatience bring out behaviors that feel abrasive or inconsiderate. I've noticed how much negativity comes from situations where people are overwhelmed, crowded, or distracted. And living in a city means encountering those situations far more often than I'd like. That's why my wife and I have started thinking about leaving the city. Not because we regret moving here, but because we're different now. The version of us who wanted the convenience of urban life isn't the same as the version who now craves calm and space. We don't need endless restaurants or bustling streets. We need a place where we can walk out the door without bracing ourselves for noise or unpredictability. A place where the view is more trees than traffic. A place where evenings end with quiet instead of sirens or shouting. It's funny how life circles back. We left the countryside because we felt ready for something new. Now we're thinking about returning because what we truly value hasn't changed. It just got buried under the novelty of convenience. It's taken a few years of adjusting to realize that the pace of the city doesn't suit us anymore. And there's no shame in admitting that. If anything, it feels like an honest step toward living the kind of life that fits who we are at this age. But beyond all the external factors, I keep coming back to the deeper question. Is avoiding people part of getting older? I think in many ways it is. Aging sharpens your priorities. It softens your tolerance for unnecessary stress. It deepens your appreciation for quiet, for gentleness, for routines that make you feel grounded. You stop pretending to enjoy things you don't. You stop putting up with noise just to feel part of the crowd. You stop saying yes to everything and start protecting your energy like it actually matters. I've spoken to friends around my age, and many of them feel the same. They're not angry or bitter about it. They're simply more selective. They choose their company carefully. They avoid places that drain them. They prefer calm environments over hectic ones. Some say they've become more sensitive to loud noises or busy rooms. Others say they've grown more reflective and less social. It doesn't feel like a flaw. It feels like a natural evolution. I think part of it is generational too. The world has changed. People communicate differently, move differently, behave differently. Social norms aren't what they used to be. Technology has transformed how we interact, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. Younger generations grew up with phones in their hands, fast-paced communication, and environments where multitasking is the default. It's natural that their behavior reflects that. But for those of us who grew up with more formality, more personal space, and slower rhythms, the modern pace can feel overwhelming. And maybe that's why it sometimes feels like the world is getting ruder, even if that's not entirely fair. It's not that everyone is rude, it's that society is busier, louder, and more distracted than before. People aren't necessarily trying to be inconsiderate, they're just overloaded. But understanding that doesn't necessarily make it easier to live in the middle of it. You can know exactly why something is happening and still feel the tension of it in your daily life. What I've realized is that avoiding people, for me, is less about frustration and more about preservation. I want to preserve my peace, my energy, and my well-being. I want to spend my days in a way that feels good, not in a way that feels obligatory or draining. If that means stepping back from the noise of the world, then that's what feels right. It's not isolation. It's intention. At the same time, I remind myself to stay aware of the line between healthy solitude and unhealthy withdrawal. It's important to stay connected, to nurture relationships, to make space for conversations that keep your mind and heart active. Avoiding chaos doesn't mean avoiding people entirely. It means choosing the kind of interactions that feel meaningful. It means saying yes to the right moments and no to the ones that leave you feeling empty. As I move further into this stage of life, I've decided to embrace this shift instead of questioning it. It's liberating to acknowledge that I don't need to engage with everything. I don't need to be everywhere. I don't need to fit into the rhythm of a world that no longer aligns with how I want to live. There's a peace that comes from stepping back, a kind of calm confidence that only age can give you. If you're around my age or even approaching it, you might be experiencing some of these changes too. Maybe you're finding crowds harder to tolerate. Maybe the noise of daily life feels heavier. Maybe you're choosing quiet evenings at home over busy outings. If so, you're not alone. Many of us are learning to navigate this stage in our own way. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. In the end, aging isn't just about getting older. It's about growing into yourself more fully. It's about recognizing what brings you peace and giving yourself permission to follow it. And if that means avoiding people more often than you used to, then maybe that's simply part of the wisdom that comes with time. Thank you for listening, and if you've experienced something similar, I'd genuinely love to hear your story. Sharing these changes helps us understand ourselves better and reminds us that these feelings are more common than we think.